Bem-vindos e bem-vindas a esse webinário que a gente estava super ansiosa para acontecer, que é justamente o lançamento do livro em português da Carolyn Taylor, uma sumidade em cultura organizacional. O livro dela é sobre accountability, você vai saber um pouquinho daqui a pouquinho, nessa entrevista exclusiva que a Carolyn deu pra gente. E quem está mediando todo esse papo é a Thalita Leles, nossa articulista e parceira aqui no RHlab. E sem mais demoras, por favor, enjoy, aproveite e compre o livro da Carolyn Taylor, que tá incrível. E qualquer dúvida aqui, ó, coloca aqui no nosso bate-papo, tá bom? Um beijo!
You.
Nice to be here.
It's a big pleasure to have you to be here with us, and I would like you please to introduce yourself a little bit and talk a little bit about you and your career and all that thing we talked about. And we're gonna talk today about your book and accountability. There is a really amazing topic, but first I'd like to hear a little bit from you.
Thank you. Well, I have been in this field. I have been working all my career as somebody who has helped individuals to grow. I started actually really starting to grow myself. I became very interested in personal development and what that means and how, as an adult, I could keep, expanding my mind and becoming less defensive and becoming better at being ambitious and being good with relationships and so on. So that was my initial career. And when I started out, I think it was perhaps easier than today, but I was a woman in a world that was all men. I mean, all men. I remember the first 10 years of my career, I would run workshops and everybody in the room would be a man. And everybody in the room would also be smoking. That's how old I am. So they would all be sitting there with their cigarettes and I would be this young woman. And I think that I survived and I thrived as a woman. My own philosophy was that I never, ever allowed myself to think that if I didn't get what I wanted, it was because I was a woman. So I made the choice that I would always say, but what could I have done better? But given this, how could I influence that person better? How could I have been cleverer at doing this? And so I just never really went down that route of, oh, I'm a woman. I never really thought of myself as a woman and everyone else being a man. Now, of course, I realized that I really was a pioneer. But at the time, I just felt like I was an ambitious person. I had many self-doubts. I started this business consulting to organizations on their own team development, their leadership development, their culture development. And I remember I wrote my first book, which was called Walking the Talk. And my father said, why would anyone pay you to give them advice? I'm going, oh, Dad, actually they do. But, then I realized, sometimes I have my doubts. Why were people paying me to give them advice? And I think I've always had doubts. But I think what was different from many other people was I also had a lot of courage. And for me, courage is fear plus action. So people look at me now and they think, oh, you have no fear. I have lots of fear. But I think the difference is that I always acted, not always, but I always tried to act, So that's how I got here. Now I'm quite well known across the world for what I do, but it's been a long journey.
An inspiration, it's amazing. Thank you. And you talked about acting and trying to get better and self-development. And I think that has a lot to do with accountability as well. And the concept of it. I don't know if you can talk a little bit about accountability in the individual perspective and an organizational perspective
Yes.
as well, because that's what we're going to talk about today. But I think it is in a way, you're accountable and in thinking
Yes.
about it as well as you're growing your career.
Yes. Well, I think, I mean, even that example I gave there, it's like I have to take accountability for my career. I can't blame men and say it was because men that they're not allowing me to succeed. But so, yeah, I have become very passionate about accountability, and I've just written a new book about accountability, which I'll just give you a quick look of here. It's called Accountability at Work. And in 3 months' time, in August, it's going to be put into Portuguese. We've already translated it. We're just getting it printed. But whoever is translating my English into Portuguese, of course, in Portuguese, there is no unique word for accountability. And in Spanish, the same, right? You have responsabilidade, but in English, we have responsibility and accountability. So the translator of this, if you can use the word accountability when I say accountability, because I'm saying that they're two different things. So for me, accountability always involves two people. So you can only be accountable in relation to somebody else who is holding you to account. So it's like there's two roles. And in English, I call them the asker, the person who is asking for something, and the giver who is delivering or promising to make that delivery. So it's like a relationship between two people. Excuse me. And whereas responsibility, I can be responsible on my own. So I can say I am responsible for my career, but I am accountable for delivering to you because I promised to come on this interview. You could say that, we had a contract that I would arrive at this time, and we're going to be talking for an hour, and I make a commitment to you that I will deliver something to you. And so we have a relationship between the two of us where you asked for something and I said yes. And then if I hadn't turned up today, for me, that is a lack of accountability.
Perfect.
So that's kind of how I make that distinction. So at an individual level, that sounds simple, but it's actually quite hard because I could have given many reasons why I couldn't be here today. I could have been late, or traffic was bad, or maybe the internet is bad. And if you're really going to be somebody who keeps their promise, who does what they say they're going to do, which is what I think accountability is. So when I give you my word is my bond, we say in English. It's my commitment. And to do that, you have to really take responsibility then for making sure I have an alternative internet connection. So if the internet doesn't work, I know I have another, I can ring you on my phone, and my phone also has an internet connection. Or, if I'm traveling somewhere, leaving enough time so I won't be late. So really people who are accountable, in my view, are people who you can trust that when they say they will do something, they do it. And that is an amazing reputation to have. I mean, it works for clients, it works for your boss, it works for your colleagues. So at an individual, I think, level, that's what accountability is. At a group level, at an organizational level, and you can see from the sign behind my head here that, I have a specialty in culture, in what makes culture, why culture helps performance. And at an organizational level, what you want is you want to build an organization where keeping your word becomes the norm, where people who are expected to keep their word, and they do keep their word. And then therefore the organization also keeps its word. Because if you are an organization who consistently does what it says it's going to do, the analysts, the investors, they reward you by putting your share price up. The customers reward you by coming back and buying your products again. Your boss rewards you being promoted, your colleagues reward you because they can trust you. I mean, it becomes a whole way of life. And in some organizations, that is the norm. And in other organizations, people get away with things, you know, they don't deliver and people give excuses, and people allow them to do that.
In thinking about a practical way, I'm just thinking about all these situations on my job as well.
Yes.
I think accountability, I don't know if you say a relation, but I think is how does impact the culture managing in a way of conflict management? Because I think if you have an accountable culture, you can solve a lot of problems, or at least minimize them for them to happen, and you can actually manage conflicts a little bit better. What do you think about it?
Well, conflict management, you put your finger on something very important, because one of the reasons that people don't deliver is because they say yes too easily. And I have found that to be particularly true in Brazil or in South America. Actually, the Latin, I mean, I'm generalizing, it's not everybody, but there is
You're right.
There is a factor, which is that people want to please, they want to help. And so they say yes. And then, of course, they say yes to too many things, and then they can't deliver. So in order to actually be accountable, you have to learn how to have perhaps difficult conversations with people at the beginning of, I call it the accountability contract. If you like, if you think about, there's a moment where I promise to you that I will do something, I will deliver something. And before that promise, there is a conversation that you and I have. You ask me for something, and I then should say, well, it's going to be difficult for me to achieve that because I have these other commitments, and I'm worried, you know, you want me to give you this by Friday. You know, would it be okay if I gave it to you next Tuesday? Because I don't think I'm going to be able to do it by Friday. Now, that in a way is it could be perceived to be a conflict. But if I don't have that conversation, and then at the end, you're expecting it on Friday and I don't deliver it, then actually there's a much bigger conflict. Well, there should be, because then you're unhappy and you should be telling me that. But of course, when people don't like conflict, they avoid conflict. So then perhaps I only deliver it on Tuesday and you don't say anything because you don't want conflict, right? So now I didn't want conflict, you don't want conflict. So we end up, I didn't deliver, you didn't get what you wanted, but neither of us had that conversation. So accountability actually does take some courage.
Much bigger thing.
Yeah, it does. And one of the things it requires is to have that kind of trust between us, or sometimes how it's called the psychological safety, you know, where I feel safe enough to have that conversation with you, honestly, to say, this might be difficult, what can we do? And then we can have a conversation, and maybe Tuesday is okay, or maybe we say, well, I can give you that, but I have to give you a bit less than, I can give half of it by Friday, or maybe we say, I can give you that, but I'll have to stop doing something else. You know, we have that kind of negotiation, and that's what starts to make it come together. So there's a skill to accountability. There's a skill for me as the giver, the person who is going to deliver to you or to obviously anyone. And there's also the skill of the asker, the person who wants something. And we all play both roles all the time. So it's not just the boss and the subordinate, because I may play that role with one person. I might play that role. I might ask things of my colleagues. I might ask things of a supplier. I might sometimes ask things of my boss. So we all play the role. And then other times I'm the one who's delivering. But yeah.
As an organization as well, thinking about the organization perspective, I work for a global company as well. And I think when we think about social responsibility, and when you go global and big, and here in Brazil, at least, and other companies that I could think of, there is a pressure to change this culture. And what you said about Latin culture, yes, it's perfect. And we have to change. We're actually have to think different now, because we have been pressured to do things differently. The process are different, and we have to take responsibility and also accountability for a lot of actions about the community, on stakeholders, on suppliers, and everything else. So what do you think on having accountable culture and working with accountability with the employees help on having a social responsibility, also policies and all these procedures? Do you think they relate?
I think they do. And in the case of ESG, or social responsibility, of course, you're making a commitment as an organization. You're making a commitment to society. So you're not making a commitment to one person. It's not like you and I having an agreement. It's a whole company promising, in effect, to take care of the environment, to take care of the societies, the broader communities of which you live. And up until recently, I think none of us really bothered with that much. I mean, we just did, we were quite selfish. Organizations were selfish, individuals were selfish. And now, of course, that has to change. So if you think about accountability, I think for an organization, one of the questions is, what is the commitment that we are making? What specifically is the commitment? Because I think we can say, you can see the name of my company is Walking the Talk. And we've always believed that it's not what you say, it's what you do, right? It's the walk and not the talk that really matters. And so many organizations now are talking about social responsibility, but not so many of them are making clear commitments as to what they promise they will do, because they can't promise everything. You can't operate in business and have zero impact. I mean, not immediately. I mean, of course, you can counteract things by planting trees and so on, but the whole process of what can I commit to? And I think some of the organizations who are having the most success have mapped out, what can the community expect of me? What would be a reasonable expectation? What would be a reasonable goal? And what could they expect of us this year or next year or the year after? That would be, I think, what it means for any organization who wants to have that social responsibility, and engaging in dialogue with people and finding out actually what the communities do expect. I think we've always been afraid to have that dialogue because it might be conflicting, as you say. It might, be uncomfortable.
Yes. And accountability, in your perspective, it is a competence that we can develop. How can we develop this competence in an individual level, and of course, organizational level as well?
Okay.
What can we do to start this culture?
All right. So I'm going to just put my book up again. I hope you can see it because it has a great diagram. Okay. I know it's in English. If you think about it, there is an asker and a giver. And then there is the promise, that moment when somebody says, I can do this. I promise I will do this. But there are sets of skills before the promise, and there are sets of skills after the promise. So as I talk now, imagine that there are 4 dimensions. There is, as an asker, the person who is making requests and holding people to account, what are the skills? And as the giver, the person who is delivering, what are the skills? So I'll put that down now. So if you think about that then, as the asker, the first skill is to make very clear requests. So what actually, and asks specific people, and ideally ask one person. So I often hear executives or anybody really, they'll end the meeting and they'll say, right, okay, so everyone's going to do that, right? Okay, everyone's going to go away and talk to their people about this. And that's it. There's no, what do I want you to do? What are we all agreeing to? Talita, there's no individual. So people kind of leave going, oh, yeah. They don't go away thinking, I made a commitment here. So the asker has a role in making specific requests in a way that then makes somebody feel that they have to say yes or no. And if you get a yes, if somebody says yes to you, then the chances that they will then deliver go up because I've made that commitment. So that's the asker's role before the promise. And then after the promise, the asker has a role then to follow up and to remind people and say, are you on track? Is this likely to happen? Or at the end to say, did everybody do it or not? If you don't do that, then people realize that there's no, if you don't show that it matters to you that people delivered, then people go, oh, well, it doesn't really matter. I can just, I won't bother. So that's the asker responsibility. The giver responsibility is to not say yes too easily. So, have the conversation and really think about what could go wrong. What are all the various things that might happen that might cause me not to be able to deliver this? So the risks, in a sense. And then to manage those risks, to think about how could I reduce that risk? How can I make sure I still deliver? How can I think about the 5 things that could go wrong here and one by one come up with a plan to make sure? So that's part of it. And then the second responsibility, I think, that the giver has after the promise is made is then not to make excuses, not to blame. I was saying before, when I was talking about myself as a woman, I never, even if, maybe I didn't get the job because a man and I was a woman and whatever, but I would never go, oh, I didn't get it because I was a woman. I would always go to myself, what could I have done differently? How could I have persuaded them? And so instead of blaming circumstances and feeling like a victim, I always try to take responsibility. And I think that's the second skill. So there are definitely skills that can be learned. It takes effort, but they can be learned.
And in an organizational level, do you think governance and procedures, norming, what do you think can help to build this accountable culture?
Well, I think that we can recognize, of course, there are the big processes, the performance management processes and the KPIs and so on. I've actually found that the real organizations where the accountability is really strong, it starts with the small stuff. It starts with people arriving at meetings on time, people ending meetings on time, people doing what they say they're going to do to each other, for each other, but in a small way, not in a, and you build up from there. So I think at an organizational level, starting to encourage people to do what they say they're going to do, to make clear commitments at the end of any interaction with somebody else, whether it's one-on-one or in a team, and have the whole leadership team of an organization say, we're going to take this seriously. And these are some of the techniques that we're going to use, which is what I covered in the book. Is just a very, very simple, but it's only like 20,000 words. It's not a big thing, but it's like, these are the things you can do that can start to build that as a habit in your team. And then, yes, obviously it is important to have organizational wide goals and individual goals. It's important to follow up on goals so that people feel that they are held to account. It's important to have an environment where you learn when you don't meet something, where people don't feel blamed, but they feel that they've learned something. All those things make a difference to build the bigger culture.
Great. And one thing that I was thinking is that you're a specialist on changing culture and changing management, I think. And do you see accountability as a competence, as an individual, of course, or organizational group competence that can actually help a little bit more on this change? What do you think? Because when you open up a company or you merge business and you have these different cultures that are merged together in different policies. I think because it is a change in behavior, all you said, it is culture is a change in behavior. Do you think it is? I think that a competence that we have to build a stronger culture and to change things that we must change as a company. What do you think about it?
Well, I mean, whatever you're trying to achieve, not just the culture, but your business performance outcomes, your customer satisfaction scores, whatever the goal of the organization is, doing what you say you're going to do and being confident as an organization that when you set a goal that people will deliver is pretty fundamental to anything that you want to do. So whether it's that you want to build a culture, whether it's that you want to open a new plant, whether it's that you want to increase your sales by 10%, I mean, all of those goals require people to do what they say they're going to do. And if there is a lot of luck, chance, magic, hope that's involved, we set these things, but we don't really have confidence that we will deliver. I feel that it's a foundation competence, really, for many of the other things you would then seek to do, is to have not only at the individual level, but also at the team and ultimately the organizational level, because the definition I like to use for culture is that it is the patterns of behavior that are encouraged or discouraged or tolerated or not tolerated in an organization. So there are patterns of behavior that we've been talking about today, which are associated with being accountable and holding others to account. And I think those patterns of behavior build an organizational competence when they are common, and when managers learn how to use them with themselves and with their teams, and it becomes the norm. And once it becomes the norm, you can bring somebody new. I've seen it happen many times. I remember one client we had in particular who was just brilliant at this. I mean, it was just very quiet. The top guy was a very quietly spoken guy, but you just always knew at the end of every meeting, it would be clear what everyone was going to do. At the beginning of the next meeting, they had 5 minutes when everybody talked about, did we do what we said we were going to do? Are there any things outstanding? It was just quietly done, but you would see new people come into that team, and within 2 weeks, they had learned that the norm in this team is that if I say I will do something, it will be done. So once you get that as a collective behavior, new people come in and they align, they adapt. Most people are capable of doing what they say they're going to do if they're in an environment where everybody else is. But if they're in an environment where people avoid making commitments, people don't follow up on commitments, nobody seems to mind whether you deliver or not, I think everybody ends up dropping down to that lower standard.
Yes, of course. So Carolyn, if you could talk a little bit about your book and actually explain if it is a guide, what can we find there, the information that we're gonna have when we read the book will be amazing, so we can understand a little bit more about the concepts. What can you talk to us?
So as I said, it is a guide, and it's first of a series I'm going to write. This one's called Accountability at Work. I'm going to write another one that's called Trust at Work and Courage at Work. So I'm going to build this series up, but this is the first. They're really quite short. I mean, in author's terms, they're 20,000 words, which is about, like 80 pages. It's a 2-hour read. And what it has is, it just deep dives on accountability. It's focused, it's called Accountability at Work, and we use the little @ sign like we do in the email. And it looks at the different roles as I've described here, and gives you just lots of tips and techniques and stories of, about how to make accountability come alive. And it's great for anyone who is trying to build their reputation as being somebody who you can rely on to deliver, or an organization or a team who want to be relied on, who want to feel confident that they can deliver. Or it's great for a leader who is frustrated because their people are not delivering, and they're going, oh, my people aren't accountable. And it really shows you how you as the leader have a role, and there are things you can do that will help the accountability of your people. So that's its purpose. And we have spent a long time working out which words we're going to use to translate, asker and giver and all of those things. So it was a bit of a challenge, given that accountability wasn't a Portuguese word. We had a lot of fun with the team from Walking the Talk, my organization in Brazil, had a lot of fun choosing the words that we were going to use. And it is being launched in Portuguese in the middle of August. And you'll be able to get it on obviously the sites that you would normally go and order your books. It's available both in soft copy and in hard copy there in Brazil. And you'll find that it's great. It's quite very reasonably priced. You can buy it for yourself, you can buy it for your teams, whoever you think might benefit from it. So that's the book. And then beyond the book, if you're interested in this work, we have a wonderful team called Walking the Talk, which is my organization. We have a team in Brazil who teach training programs about walking, how you can walk this, how you can become more accountable. We advise companies, we help companies who are trying to build their culture, especially a culture of accountability. So if any of you want to contact them, of course, go on the website, which is walkingthetalk.com, and you'll find the local Brazilian numbers in there, and you can contact us. I'm sure they'd love to hear from you. So I wish you very well with this. It's an interesting challenge to become more accountable, but it's very satisfying.
Thank you so much. And I love to hear about all these themes. And I think it's so practical and so useful in our days, because we need this competence when we need to change behavior. We don't know how to start. And that's an amazing thing to develop and to think about in our days, especially here in our political environment that we have now in Brazil. So yes, it's something that we really need to talk about, because I think, well, we have to change individually, of course. And so this can grow and we can change the society. So I think it's an amazing thing to do. Thank you so much for your work.
Thank you very much for having me on this show. I've enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you very much. It's been great to be with you.